We're still on the topic, actually, of forgiveness here. This is from the workbook lesson 134. There is a simple way to find the door to true forgiveness and perceive it open wide in welcome. When you feel that you are tempted to accuse someone of sin in any form, do not allow your mind to dwell on what you think he did, for that is self-deception. This is a real challenge for us as we look about the world and run into people that we have problems with, to look at. There's actually a line in the Course, I may have mentioned this, but it actually asks us to transcend what we see and to go ahead and see the face of Christ under these most, as Mother Teresa said, distressing of disguises. And sometimes it is a very distressing disguise that's there, especially when we're seeing something that looks hurtful or harmful to the rest of the world. And yet to realize that there's a soul in there that's crying out as well. Ask and said, would I accuse myself of doing this? So the body's eyes see only form. They cannot see beyond what they were made to see, and they were made to look on air and not past it. So let's keep in mind, if the body is being equated with the ego, which it often is, the body is the ego's chosen home. So on that level, we are very, very identified with these bodies, right? We do tend to think that this is who we are, for good or for ill or whatever. Ultimately, of course, thank God for death, because death is the key to help us to understand that this is not who you are. Not in truth, not in reality, not in eternity, where in eternity is what matters. There is indeed a strange perception, for they can see only illusions, unable to look beyond the granite blocks of sin, and stopped at the outside form of nothing. So we look at the block of sin. That's what we see. We see this granite block of sin, which means it's like this hard, solid surface of what we're calling reality, and then we think that we can't see beyond that. Switch? All right.
No, that's on.
Oh, thank you. All right. To this distorted form of vision, the outside of everything, the wall that stands between you and the truth is wholly true. Yet how can sight that stops at nothing, as if it were a solid wall, see truly? So we're not really seeing, are we really seeing each other when we let our sight stop at the surface, so to speak, of what we see, the decoration, the whatever it is, the prettiness or the ugliness that we ourselves are throwing on top of it? Do we see the person behind all that?
The personality.
That's what we see, yeah. It is held back by form having been made to guarantee that nothing else but form will be perceived. So we're transcending, that's the whole point. We've got to transcend the outside. Now, I already started talking about polishing and cleaning, and that's what that's part of the theme for this afternoon. So perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, where it undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind. So try to think about this being centered. I have often said, this is Meister Eckhart, who I really like a lot as a teacher from the 13th century. I have often said that a person who wishes to begin a good life should be like a circle. Let him get the center in the right place and keep it so, and the circumference will be good. Right?
Yes.
So let's just get centered on this, okay? And that's what really all these characteristics of a teacher of God are leading us to, as I I polish up this forgiveness thing, this honesty thing, this tolerance thing. I get clearer and clearer about that so that it's not a block. The whole purpose of the Course, it says on the first page, removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So that's all we're doing. And this is a review too. You know how often I reviewed this. Anybody got this memorized? You've got it memorized? Good. Anybody else got it? You got it memorized? I encourage you to memorize this and say this whenever you're in any kind of distress. And so don't be surprised if every once in a while, every few months, I'll throw it at you again. Page 448 from the FIP edition, responsibility for sight. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience. I choose the feelings I experience. If you're thinking about it, right? So you have a feeling about something. You chose that feeling. You chose to be distressed by that, or upset by that, or annoyed by that, right? I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for, and I receive as I has asked. And that's the hard part. That's to think that I asked for this, and there'll be times that I didn't ask for this, but here it is, you know. So it must be your lesson because it's the lesson you're dealing with.
The key word is seems.
Key word is what?
Seems.
Seems, yeah. So everything you perceive as the outside world is merely your attempt to maintain your ego identification. For everyone believes that identification is salvation. Yet consider what has happened, for thoughts do have consequences for the thinker. Think about it. For thoughts do have consequences for the thinker. Well, underline that one. Right? You have become at odds with the world as you perceive it because you think it is antagonistic to you. This is a necessary consequences of what you have done. You must realize that your hatred is in your mind and not outside it before you can get rid of it. And while you must get rid of it before you can perceive the world as it really is. As it really is, we're okay, right? As it really is, we really do love each other. Isn't that nice to know? We really love each other. It's really nice to have that realization. So all that other stuff that gets covered over it is just stuff. The vision of Christ blesses the world. God could not create guilt. That's not from the Course. That's my writing here. We create guilt when we hurt any part of the whole, including ourselves. You know, if you felt guilty, guilt is a very unpleasant experience. It's because you've hurt something. You hurt yourself, you hurt somebody else. Either way, you did something that was selfish again. You know, that's the basic problem of the ego, is selfishness. We feel guilty when we act selfish. We cannot be selfish and guilt-free. That's, all right, now from the Course. Your part is only to offer him a little willingness. The Course places a lot of emphasis upon a little willingness. To let him remove all fear and hatred and to be forgiven. On your little faith, joined with his understanding, he will build your part in the atonement and make sure that you fulfill it easily. Let's keep going on. Okay, so there's 10 characteristics. We're going to get one of them in this afternoon. Maybe two, but probably just one. We did trust the last time. There's an order to the 10 characteristics. I go over them in the book, the Lesson 101, Perfect Happiness, in more detail than we're going to be able to do here. So, trust is first, because what we're trusting is that there really is a God. And there really is Dharma. I mean, there really is a law. There is a principle that runs everything, that's behind all that's good. if we can get in alignment with it. And another way we could say this is that all there is heaven, but that's not what our experience is. I mean, that's not what our experience is in this world. But we're really looking to for something which transcends this world. Because if that's all there is, then let's keep dancing. I mean, if it's just the outside, if all there is what you see on the news, then we are in tragic conditions. Yeah, but that's not all there is. That's what the Course is telling us. There's a lot more. We got to transcend this. Right? What we are trusting, as I said, is that there's a God. So honesty is number 2. All of the traits of God's teachers rest on trust. Once that has been achieved, the others cannot fail to follow. And this is just a continuation of that same quote. Only the trusting can afford honesty, for only they can see its value. Honesty does not apply only to what you say. The term actually means consistency. There's nothing you say that contradicts what you think or do. No thought opposes another thought. Another way that Jesus talks about that in the Course many times and with lots of clarity is you cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve the ego and spirit. And that's the predicament that we get into is we think, well, I'll let a little ego in. I'll let ego control, it'll handle this situation, right? But the Course is saying, no, you can't have two. You can only have one. It's either God, it's either truth, it's either honesty, it's either works, or you've got a mixed mind, right? And the mixed mind is not a whole mind. It's not a healed mind. So we want to go to the wholly healed mind. There is nothing you can say that contradicts what you think or do. No thought opposes any other thought, nor act belies your world, and no word lacks agreement with another. Such are the truly honest. At no level are they in conflict with themselves. Did you ever have trouble sleeping because you were conflicted within yourself about something, right? So we're just looking at the conflict. And we think, why am I conflicted about this? And why do I have these ambiguous feelings? And what can I do to clean this up so that I don't continue to do this? Right? Therefore, it is impossible for them to be in conflict with anyone or anything. That's truly honest. Now, several years ago, I read this book called Radical Honesty by a guy named Dr. Brad Blenton, and I went to hear him give a talk at a Barnes & Noble stores in Paramus, New Jersey, a long time ago, right after the book came out. So I'm going to change what this is what it says in the book, but I'm going to change that. That would have to be 40 years now. If he wrote the book around 2004, I have been a psychotherapist in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. This is what I have learned. We all lie like hell. It wears us out. It is a major source of human stress. Lying kills people. The kind of lying that's most deadly, is withholding or keeping back information from someone we think would be affected by it. Psychological illnesses of the severest kind is the result of this kind of lying. So let's be honest. We all lie. Good. Tell me that you don't, and I will say that you are the biggest liar in the room. Actually, Brad Blenton in his book tells about a study that was made a number of years ago in which people were guaranteed 100% anonymity. You will not be known. You don't put your name on this, even write down your name on what this is. And it was a psychological test. And one of the questions on there was, do you lie? And how often do you lie, et cetera. So 93% of the people who answered it said that they lied. with some degree of regularity. And Blanton thought that the other 7% were the biggest liars of all. By the way, there's two kinds of lying, so we'll talk about. By that I mean, there's in Jordan Peterson's work, you're all familiar. I'm going to be quoting Jordan Peterson again pretty soon as well. He says one of his characteristics of one of the rules of life, the 12 rules of life, is tell the truth, at least don't lie. Now, what's the difference between telling the truth and at least don't lie? Telling the truth is when you're telling the truth about something that's in the past, that's in your own story, right? At least don't lie means that you're making up a story. At least don't make up a story. That's what it's saying. And I will not mention names again, but we know there's an unfortunate experience of this that we've all known about that's been in the news lately, but it's a dramatic illustration of what we're talking about. Okay. I mentioned, let me go back to two Hollywood executives are talking. One of them says to the other one, "You're lying to me." And one says, "Yes, but hear me out." Couldn't help but throw that in. That's a little piece of fun. It's kind of the way it goes sometimes. Yes, but hear me out. Now, I mentioned R.D. Laing earlier, and the bit about insanity. He says, and by the way, not every psychologist gets as interested in psychosis as did R.D. Laing. Insanity, he says, is a perfectly rational adjustment to an insane world. You might have think that this should have been up earlier with the insanity part that I was doing, but there's something about him that I want to tell you. His views were based on existential philosophy, which held that the primary value is authenticity. So that takes us back to honesty. Strange thing happened to R.D. Laing. He was a really good, deeply involved psychiatrist who really, not every psychiatrist gets really interested in psychosis and schizophrenia. He was really interested in psychosis and schizophrenia, what really makes us really mad, not just ordinary anxiety and neurosis, right? And he admitted later in his life that he was having trouble with alcohol and depression. And he was brought up before the he was a Scotsman, board, and he had to stop working because he was honest about his experience, right? So he was very young. He died playing tennis, interestingly enough. I mean, he had a heart attack on the tennis court. But so that's sort of interesting that, that he would express his honesty, like I have trouble with alcohol and I have trouble with depression, and so you can't practice medicine anymore. But he was so dedicated to his field and what he was doing. Okay. So this is Jordan Peterson. This is first rule for life is stop doing things which are wrong, what you know are wrong, which you could stop doing. That's sort of interesting. You stop. How simple this is, actually. You're doing something, you know it's wrong. You could stop it. So why don't we stop it? This is where the real healing occurs. This is where the polishing and the cleaning really occurs, when we actually do it, where we actually change something about ourselves. And then not only do you see the change, but it continues to work. So there are things we all do which we know are not of our best interest. It might be a little thing. If we can do this, our vision will clear up a bit and we'll see other things which we could also stop doing. Say you complain a lot, so stop it. I mean, just stop the complaining. But catch yourself and stop it. Like what I said about catching myself complaining about the robocalls. And the minute I did that, I thought, why am I throwing this out there into the world? Do I have to point this out? No, I mean, it's a simple little thing. These are actually self-evident. The idea is to continually move away from what is untrue. Once you do that, you find another subset of things you can clear up. So it's like as we're polishing, so you clear up one thing and you get this, let's say that you're trying to lose weight, and you actually succeed, and you actually succeed in maintaining it. Okay, now you don't have to work on that quite so hard anymore because you've learned how to maintain that. So now I'll work on something else. I'll clean up my finances, let's say. Or whatever it is that I look at in my life that says, no, this needs a little work. But I got to do it, right? So the reason this course is simple is that truth is simple. Complexity is the ego and nothing more than the ego's attempt to obscure the obvious. It's really, the course says so. This is a very simple course. And then what adds, but it isn't easy, right? Why can't we do something that's easy, that's simple and easy? Both. But we seem to be stuck on it.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course you can, but you need a microphone.
The mic's there. I'm not going to get in front of them.
Okay, yeah, we have a thing about.
What do you make of that whole business of telling the truth and getting in trouble for it?
On his part?
No, I mean, it happens to
Oh,
a
no,
lot of...
yeah. Okay, that's a good question.
No, take the microphone back over here.
All right, so do y'all get the question that Eric was asking? All right, so there may be times when we won't want to say everything because it could get you into trouble, as it did him, right? You have to think about that. What God is forgiving egos or not is the simplest and shortest way that I can say that. God is forgiving egos or not. All right, so if you're working with a therapist, the therapist must maintain an integrity which they don't talk about what's going on with the patient. Doctors the first rule is don't hurt somebody else, right? So lawyers, you don't talk about what's going on with your clients. There's a certain sense, you have to maintain a professional quality about that, right? And that would be true for lots of other instances as well. You have to think about when it is that you wouldn't share that information, right? We're going to be talking more about that. It's going to come up in a slide here that I've got in just a minute. So I thought this was interesting. Notice this, the first Superman movie with Christopher, not Steve. Isn't it interesting that both Supermans were Reeves? They had the same last name, Steve Reeves and then Christopher Reeves, right? And Margaret, so he's flying around with, you remember the famous scene, he's flying around with Margot Kidder and they land on her balcony and they're looking into each other's eyes and it's a romantic moment and you think it's going to be a kiss and she says to him, Superman, what do you believe in? And Superman says, I believe in truth, justice, and the American way. And Margot Kidder says, you got to be kidding. And then he responds with, Lois, I never lie. That's a lie. It's a lie because Clark Kent has to constantly lie, saying he has no knowledge of Superman. So his alter ego, right? How you put it, I don't know who this, right? Okay, that's just sort of fun. All right. Self-deception. So who among us is always honest? The good news is that we can be working on it. Now this is what you were talking about, Eric, a moment ago. There is such a thing as cruel truth. And cruel truth is not the truth. I mean, cruel truth is maybe the truth in an objective sense, but it's not if we're using it to hurt. Not if we're using it as a weapon to attack someone, right? So as I said, the first law of medicine is do no harm. Psychologists, lawyers, ministers, anonymous groups, people who are in anonymous groups, you agree within the anonymous group that you don't share what goes on within the anonymous group outside of the group, right? There has to be those kind of times, confidentiality that must be observed, right? Perhaps our task when we feel the impulse to confess is to be certain that others aren't injured by our admission. That's also answer to your question. By Martha Carver, who wrote a book called What a Shrink Thinks. She lives and works here in New York City, by the way. As I said, God is forgetting eagles don't know how to forgive. So if they don't know how to forgive, how are they going to forgive? All right? Guilt feelings are reflections of places where we need to do some work. So really think about, and I'll bet you that if, again, it may be in those early morning hours when you're just laying there in bed, that you start going over the problems that are in your life, and that some of those may be guilt, or maybe it's keeping you awake at night, the guilt feelings, right? In which case, this is what, again, you really want to be looking at.
Which is happening to the projector?
Oh, who knows? Projection makes perception.
The perception just disappeared.
Yeah, there we go. So God has no secret communications, for everything of him is perfectly open and freely accessible to all, being for all. Nothing lives in secret. That's an interesting line. Nothing lives in secret. Secret is a dead place.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful.
Secret is a place where we're hiding. And because it's a place where we're hiding, it's not alive. It's not a shared place. And we all have our private worlds. As close and as intimate as we may be with anybody, take a couple, any couple, right? There are still things that the couple don't talk about, right? I mean, maybe you can be sharing a great deal, but hurt feelings, etc. I'm not saying you have to. It's just, we're just looking at this. Nothing lives, and it's a kind of, the main thing is communication. Divine abstraction, God takes joy in sharing. It's in the sharing that we find our greatest joy. So our stories are just stories. What is tragic to us is inconsequential in heaven. God cannot be, love cannot be hidden, right? God doesn't even know your story. Oh God. No, it's true. I mean, God doesn't know your story. That's true in terms of the Course. God knows you as you are. God knows you as the truth of who you are. And that's why we're sleeping. And we're dreaming. And some folks are having nightmares. So the idea is that we awaken from the dreams. We especially want to awaken from a nightmare, because nobody enjoys a nightmare. And that's really a trapped place. You ever wake up from a nightmare, you're just so relieved that you're not, that it was not real, right? That there was no truth in that at all, thank God, right? Let's go back to this. For he will heal every thought, guilt you have ever kept to hurt you, and cleanse it of its littleness. It's nothing. It's actually this secret that you had. Let me tell you, this was when I was in graduate school. I had to participate in a therapy group. It was a requirement, because we were going to be leading such groups ourselves someday, and seeing how we're going to be leading such groups. And it was decided that we would go around the room, and everyone would share a secret that they hadn't shared with anybody. And this went on for a period of, I don't know, like 3 months or something. It wasn't just like it all happened in one night. And everybody had shared except for one guy. And finally, it's the last day that we're going to be breaking with. The semester was over. We're going to take off for summer. And they said, well, you're the only one who hasn't shared. And he said, I killed my wife. And of course, it was like everybody, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, as it turned out, he hadn't really killed his wife. He had been driving in an automobile, and there was an automobile accident in which his wife was killed. He was not charged with a crime, but he nevertheless blamed himself for not having been a more careful driver, right? But it was such a dramatic thing, to have that happen. And what a relief that he kind of got that out. Nothing was wrong. It's just that he was carrying this burden around of thinking that he was responsible somehow or another for something that was not a crime. Yes.
In the 12 steps, it said, we're as sick as our secrets.
We're as sick as our secrets, right. That's a good point. All right. For he will heal every little thought, guilt, you've kept to hurt you, and cleanse it of its littleness, restoring it to the magnitude of God. Guilt really hurts us more than anything. It's hurting us. It's painful to us. There's nothing outside of that. We're the ones that suffer with it. But you got to look at it. Okay. The ego then is nothing more than a delusional system in which you made your own father. Make no mistakes about this. It sounds insane when it's stated with perfect honesty. By not seeing you as you are, it, the ego, can see itself as it wants to be. So it's making it up, right? The ego never looks on what it does with perfect honesty. Whoa. Because if it did, it wouldn't see it, right?
Doesn't have the capability.
It doesn't have the capability, right. Nothing is more conducive to peace of mind than not having it. This is not from the Course. This is from George Christopher Lichtenstein, or Berg, is it? Berg, right? I like that. Nothing is more conducive to peace of mind. So what I'm getting at here, opinions are not the truth. All right, and we're going to see that more in the next slide. So the ego, therefore, wants you to engage your mind in its own delusional system, because otherwise the light of your understanding would dispel it. It wants no part of truth because the ego itself is not true. If truth is total, the untrue cannot exist. Commitment to either must be total. They cannot coexist in your mind without splitting it. If they cannot coexist in peace, and if you want peace, you must give up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time. This requires vigilance. There's a lot of importance on vigilance in the Course and in the Bible. And several of Jesus' parables are about vigilance, right? This requires vigilance only as long as you do not recognize what is true. While you believe that two totally conflicting thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. We already talked about we cannot have two conflicting thought systems going on at the same time. And then back to opinions. Opinions are not the truth, they're judgments, right? Love makes no comparisons. And then I probably told you this, the crow and raven story, but anyhow, I'll tell you again. For those who don't know, what's the difference between a crow and a raven? The answer is that the crows have these 4 long feathers which come off the tip end of their wings, and those feathers are called pinions. And a raven, rather than having 4, has 5. So it's just a matter of opinion. All righty. It's just opinion. The greatest deception men suffer from is their own opinions, Leonardo da Vinci. Right? Opinions don't mean anything, right? I mean, it really doesn't, especially the ones that are the heavy judgmental kinds of things that we would throw out onto the world. It's not talking about, I like that particular piece of music, or I didn't like that particular piece of music, but something that goes much deeper in terms of hurting and cutting, right? Some stuff is buried so deeply We see it only in slips of tongues and jokes and dreams and accidents which are not entirely accidents. Or something that happens, and then after it's happened, you think, why in the world did this happen? And what is this experience really telling me? I wasn't expecting this, and all of a sudden I have to go through this experience, and I'm responsible somehow or another for this, whatever it is that I'm experiencing. I love this quote from Buddhists saying, do not seek enlightenment, simply cease to cherish opinions. Isn't that nice? Just, you don't have to worry about enlightenment, just cease cherishing opinions. Bring therefore all your dark and secret thoughts to him, and look upon them with him. He holds the light and you the darkness. They cannot coexist when both of you together look on them. His judgment must prevail, and he will give it to you as you join your perception to his. Think honestly. What have you thought God would not have thought? And what have you not thought that God would have you think? That's really the second part, is really, what have you not thought that God would have you think? Think of anyone that you don't like, that you have some sort of condemnatory attitude toward, and see if you can reach past that, to not seeing that quality in them, but to seeing the face of Christ there instead, because the face of Christ is there, if you're willing to look deeply enough. And it doesn't make any difference what's on the surface. You might even disagree with this person completely on the surface. It doesn't matter that you have a different agreement. You may be of a different religion or a different political philosophy or something. It doesn't make any difference what any of that surface stuff is. The fact is that this is a brother or a sister who is deserving of my love, and maybe asking for it as well. Maybe asking for it rather strongly and bluntly, right? Sometimes all you need to do is just give some attention, respond. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone, and then change your mind what to think with God. That's an interesting, huh? Okay, this is tolerance, and I think we will not do tolerance because it's a door, and the clock says that it's time for us to do a couple other things. So we're getting one. I hope to pick up the speed on this and to get through the others more quickly. But if we don't, it doesn't matter. Right? Any questions? I would like to do meditation. Okay. So, if you want to get quiet and close your eyes and just relax and be very present. So the meditation I want to share with you is actually today's lesson from A Course in Miracles. If you had started A Course in Miracles with Lesson 1 on January 1st, this is the lesson you would have today. Oh, by the way, I'm going to say, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. A few times, I'm going to ask you to say that with me. Can you remember it? My grievances hide the light of the world in me. I will say with me, okay? No one can look upon what your grievances conceal, because your grievances are hiding the light of the world in you. Everyone stands in darkness, and you beside him. But as the veil of your grievance is lifted, you are released with him. Share your salvation now with him who stood beside you when you were in hell. He is your brother in the light of the world that saves you both. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. Today, let us make another real attempt to reach the light in you. Before we undertake this in our more extended practice periods, let us devote several minutes to thinking about what we are trying to do. We are literally attempting to get in touch with the salvation of the world. We are trying to see past the veil of darkness that keeps it concealed. We are trying to let the veil be lifted and to see the tears of God's Son disappear in the sunlight. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. Let us follow our longer practice periods with the full realization that this is so, and with real determination to reach what is dearest to us than all else. Salvation is the only need. There is no other purpose here and no other function to fulfill. Learning salvation is our only goal. Let us end the ancient search today by finding the light in us and holding it up for everyone who searches with us to look upon and rejoice. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. Think of your mind as a vast circle, surrounded by a layer of heavy, dark clouds. You can see only the clouds because you seem to be standing outside the circle and quite apart from it. From where you stand, you can see no reason to believe there is a brilliant light hidden by the clouds. The clouds seem to be the only reality. They seem to be all there is to see. Therefore, you do not attempt to go through them and pass them, which is the only way in which you would be really convinced of their lack of substance. We will make this attempt today. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. After you have thought about the importance of what you are trying to do for yourself and the world, try to settle down in perfect stillness. Remember only how much you want to reach the light in you today, now. Determined to go past the clouds. Reach out and touch them in your mind. Brush them aside with your hands. Feel them resting on your cheek and forehead and eyelids as you go through them. Go on. Clouds cannot stop you. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. If you're doing the exercise properly, you will begin to feel a sense of being lifted up and carried ahead. Your little effort and small determination call on the power of the universe to help you, and God Himself will raise you from darkness into light. You are in accord with His will. You cannot fail because your will is His. Say with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. Have confidence in your Father today, and be certain that He has heard you and answered you. You may not recognize His answer yet, but you can indeed be sure that it is given you and you will yet receive it. Try as you attempt to go through the clouds to the light, to hold this confidence in your mind. Try to remember that you are at last joining your will to God's. Try to keep the thought clearly in your mind that what you undertake with God must succeed. Then let the power of God work in you and through you, that His will and yours be done. Remind yourself also that you are not searching alone, and you do know where to look for it's to be so. Say then with me, my grievances hide the light of the world in me. Amen. Thank you. Okay. Well, we will try to get past trust next time. Then in May, remember that we have our special guest who's coming down to talk about, and she's really, really bright, and I think you're going to enjoy her thoroughly. Her name is Christina Strutt. We're going to talk Indra's net and how everything is connected together. And if you want to join us for dinner, come join us for dinner. Thank you.